Welcome everyone and hello. Thank you for joining us tonight for this virtual artist talk with Jakob Dwight and Richard Dial, moderated by exhibition curator Paul Barrett. I am Sophie Skipper with Wiregrass Museum of Art. I'm our special events and marketing coordinator, and I'll be hosting us tonight. I want to remind everyone that about 15 minutes before 7 or 15 minutes at the end, we're going to have a Q&A session. So as Paul, Richard, and Jakob are speaking, if you have a question that comes to mind, there should be a question box or a chat box. You can go ahead and insert your question, and we'll save all of those to the end, and I'll pop back on and get those questions going. For those of you who are new with us, Wiregrass Museum of Art, or WMA, is a contemporary art museum in Dothan, Alabama. We work to support art and artists of our time, specifically those in Alabama and the Southeast region. We provide life-changing experiences through the visual arts to our community and beyond through innovative exhibitions, lifelong educational programming, and community-centered events. Moderating tonight is Paul Barrett. He is the curator of I Too Am Thornton Dial. The presentation of works at WMA focuses on Thornton Dial's works on paper and has been a really powerful show that so many have been able to enjoy. I Too Am Thornton Dial is on view now through March 25th, so 2023. So it's ending this month. So if you have the opportunity, definitely come out and see it. It's been such a joy to have in our galleries. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Paul and we're going to get started.
Thanks so much, Sophie. I also want to make sure that anyone who has not visited the Wiregrass Museum of Art knows that the museum is free to the public. So it's a wonderful thing to have such a great museum bringing exhibitions like mine and many others to the community free of charge. The Thornton Dial exhibition has been almost certainly the biggest and one of the most important projects that I've ever worked on, and it really was very satisfying not only to have the opportunity to work with Thornton Dial's work in particular, but also to have the opportunity to work with people like Richard Dial and Jakob Dwight, who are with me tonight on this project, on previous talks, on interviews. Jakob contributed to the Thornton Dial catalog that the Wiregrass Museum of Art has for sale. And I'm very glad to have the two of you here to talk about your own art and talk about your art in the context of this exhibition and how we've been working together. So Richard, if I may start with you, I'd love to hear in your own words about how you got started making art. You were telling me earlier that you had been drawing and doing things starting at an early age, and I'd just like to hear from you how you got started making art.
Basically, when Daddy first met Mr. Bill Arnett, I had never been in a museum. Daddy had never been in a museum. So to just kind of visualize what you think might be in a museum, we didn't have that vision, but we did have that creative side of us, and that's what we created out of. Now, how our artwork would fit into, the museums, we had no earthly idea. So we just created, basically, me, myself personally, I just created out of what was inside of me, and that's what I do. And so when you look at my artwork, really basic kind of telling a story somewhere that I experienced through life. And that's what drives me, to create. And now that I do have the opportunity, to place pieces in different galleries and museums, it gives you that incentive that, it's accepted, and you can just, create, from what's inside of you. And I guess that most artists, I mean, I don't know for sure, but I guess with most artists, when they create, they actually, that creation is a part of who they are, and it's kind of like the piece that at the High Museum.
Yeah, let me show folks that because
Okay.
you're talking about not necessarily knowing whether your work would fit in, but this piece, The Comfort and Service My Daddy Brings to Our Household, has been on more or less continuous display at the High Museum for years. I love seeing it when I go into the gallery. You have work in the Toledo Museum of Art. You have work in the American Folk Art Museum in New York. The Birmingham Museum of Art bought 2 pieces from you. And I know that there are other museums as well. So you've been making art like this for a long time, but these pieces you started making in the 80s. You talked about Bill Arnett being introduced to your father, Thornton Dial. Lonnie Holly, another Alabama artist, introduced Bill to your dad in, I believe it was 1987. Is that right?
Right.
But you had already been making drawings and you were interested in art, even if you weren't necessarily thinking of museums at that point, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, this, like I said, earlier, it just that, I was just basic kind of creating out of my own vision. And, I had no earthly idea that, like the museums such as the High would even be interested in it, because like I said, I'd never been into a museum in my life. And it just, that's where this whole story about Richard Dial, that's where it started at, and over the years, I've made art, but I also had a responsibility, of trying to carry on the Dial's metal pattern, which probably had at one time like 25 employees, and which was a huge job. And I didn't get the opportunity, to really create on a level that I wanted to. And I think,
and you started Dial Metal Patterns a few years before this. That was about 84, right?
About 84, and it was, it was something that, kind of grew a little bit out of control too, as to the expectations, it wound up, in a real nice location in Bessemer,
But it started out in the chicken coop behind your great aunt's house.
From the chicken coop, and I look at things today and wonder, how did I even get there? It's just magical. Once you put your mind to something and dedicate yourself to it, you'd be surprised, and put a little hard work in it, you can be surprised at the outcome. And as this day in my life, I'm still real proud of everything that was accomplished in that period. I just wished I had maybe 48 hours in a day instead of, 24, but, it is what it is. And so now I have a little bit more free time, I think, to create. So that's what I'm doing.
Well, and you and your dad shared studio space for a lot of years because of working side by side at Dial Metal Patterns, and then later when you were both making art.
Exactly. After my mom passed, Mr. Arnett, he wanted to have a whole studio built. And I said, well, what, part of this, huge facility is, got a lot of open space in it. And so we cut off a certain section for Daddy to work out of, and that kind of just get him away from the house, because Mom had just passed and he could just kind of focus on just creating art. And so that's probably during that time is when me and Mr. Arnett kind of grew a lot closer together. And I probably created a lot more in that particular time than previous times, but I, grew a great passion for just creating, just visual art. And so it's something, that I really just now getting to be able to just dive into and work as my free will without having the weight of Dial Metal on me, or really, supporting Daddy, because, in this time, he had grew, had got a lot older. And that was something, I guess, that were a part of our relationship. It was just times when we had to lean on each other. And there was a time, when I had to lean on him because he was getting older. And I wanted to give him as much support as I could, helping him, gather up materials and things of that nature to work with. And so,
but you've continued to work, and we've got a couple of other chairs that you made that were in the exhibition that you and Jacob were both in, that we had at Mouse Contemporary in Birmingham last year, when the shows at Samford University and Ava both opened.
Right. So you're kind of getting a little bit of vision of, the side of me that's, kind of rebooting, to create, which I love. And so I just thinking that this is a time, when I really would be able to kind of, work to my will. I don't have any other weights that's, pulling me away from my work, but I do have to admit, that a lot of times, I really kind of focus on trying to help Dad as much as I could because of his age situation, Yeah.
Well, and Jacob, when you and I first met, the first work of yours that I was familiar with was your Autonomous Prism series. Could you talk to us a little bit about what you had been working on when you and I first started talking to each other?
Sure. So the Autonomous Prism came from, it's a generative artwork, meaning that it started from a glitch. I'll explain it this way. It started from a glitch that I guess found or encountered. I was trying to do something else on the computer, and I guess it kind of misfired, and I was making a video, and the video that I end up getting from the computer was spitting out just this video of colorful noise.
Mhm.
And later on, I processed the video and started to cut down each frame. And it wasn't every frame, but almost every frame was a different field of colorful noise. And so I kept it. I wasn't going to throw it away because I thought it was a failure, you know. But once I started to see potential in it, I started to use each of the individual images and or the frames of the video and use them for stills. This particular piece came from I guess a series that was derived from the Autonomous Prism, which was for the commission for the Seattle Art Museum. Their show Disguise, Mask in Global African Art, which was 24, in some locations 25 artists chosen from the African diaspora, so North America, Europe, Africa, and South America mostly, and then Saya, who's also half Japanese Brazilian. But the theme of the show was to reinterpret the way that masks have been presented in the so-called, I guess, Western art world. And so in museums, basically they display masks as a kind of as a dead artifact rather than a living thing. Mm-hmm. When they actually come from these processional, very live, very time-based, a lot of things, you know, very sophisticated, complex systems of philosophy, but also ritualism and storytelling. So the Disguise was an attempt for all 24, 25 of the artists to kind of reinterpret what that meant for us and this time, and rather than for me, for my contribution, I presented the video as a whole, or I think it was ended up being maybe 8 different videos that were all pulled from the same source, and I stenciled the general mask form of masks that they had in their collection. And this one is a Punu from the Punu people in Gabon. It's a funerary kind of ancestral celebration, and there's a couple of different variations of it in the area. I think it's the Ogooué River in Gabon, but yeah, so that's what it is. So a lot of my digital work, I would say probably 90% of it was pulled from this so-called accident, or what I thought was a failure and a glitch that happened in Berlin in 2010 at a residency. So for this one is 2010 through 2014, and as it is now, I'm on I think 2021 was the last one. So for 11 years, I've been kind of picking from the same field of noise, I guess. So,
but over the last couple of years, you've been moving back into analog art forms. You're using your own digital forms to inspire new work, and actually went back into painting. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Sure. So yeah, like Richard, I was involved in art at a young age, or art making rather, and I started off. We had talked, and Paul, you know my story with knowing Charles Smith as a child.
So I was born ceramic artist in Mobile, Alabama.
Right. So I was born here in Mobile. I'm broadcasting from Mobile, and my mother collected the works of Charles Smith. So I was maybe 4 or 5 years old. So that I would actually, you know, we were going to a studio and she was picking out work. And I just remember him being one of my favorite, you know, adults, or at least doing one of my favorite jobs that I'd seen thus far at 4 years old. Like, okay, I want to do that. Like what he's doing, just making stuff all day. And so from there, I wanted to do something three-dimensional. As a kid, I wanted to do, you know, sculpture and possibly ceramics, but I was more into sculpture, but I was also into drawing and painting. So my first training was really in painting. At 10 years old, took a course that was 2 times a week. And so from 12 to say 19, I was painting. And as I mentioned in the book, when I got a little bit older, it became very cumbersome to continue to paint, and for various reasons, but we'll talk about, I guess, why it became a little bit more difficult as I got older. So yeah, at about 19, 20, I started doing digital art, just to kind of get out my ideas quickly. Digital art was a realm that was new within the art world. So, you know, I'd been studying, quote unquote, the old masters and, you know, abstract expressionism, and had really kind of had an exhaustive view overall that there might not be too much more that I could do in painting. Rather, whereas with digital art being new, what the old masters were trying to do with certain visual techniques capturing light, I thought could be really updated into a digital practice. And also, you know, it was just avant-garde. I wanted to be like, you know, part of the people doing the new, you know, new forms and new work, kind of breaking new ground. So, but recently I've been doing digital art for 20 years, and recently, yeah, about 2 years ago, I just went back to painting, inspired by a couple of different things, but one was just being tired of being online and tired of, you know, I guess screen time. You know, I've been looking at computers since I was 8 years old, and you know, my dad's a computer engineer, like first generation. So we used to get, you know, the kind of hand-me-down early computers. You know, I was one of the first kids in my neighborhood to have a home computer, and so I say since 8, I've been looking at a screen and experiencing the universe in that way. And I just got tired of it maybe 2 years ago. And also I missed painting. Then wanted to get back to it and just, you know, get back to real world analog methods, I guess. So yes, what you're seeing or what you saw on the screen were paintings that were shown, or that are on view right now at Mouse Contemporary in Birmingham until what tomorrow, I guess. So yeah,
It's a beautiful show. Your art style had to change when you were still very young. Can you talk about the events that led to the change and the way that you had gone from drawing when you were 10 to, and influenced the way that you were working when you were older as a teenager?
sure, yes. So in 1989, at the age of 12, I was diagnosed with a benign brain tumor, and they operated in that year and were able to remove the tumor, and everything was pretty much successful except for a what they call a partial paresis, which is a partial paralysis in my and on the right side of my body. So basically gross motor which are the larger movements versus the fine motor. Gross motor was affected, so I pretty much had to relearn how to walk to some extent. Nothing was wrong with my speech, but I pretty much lost I lost fine motor control. It wasn't gross motor. I lost fine motor control in my right hand, and I was right hand dominant. So I changed over to my left hand and did therapy for a while, but being an impatient little kid, you know, I caught up with my left hand, and I thought it was cool and novel that, you know, so I just went on because it allowed me to continue working. And therapy was, I guess it was, I remember it being a little bit too hard for me. But also I think there was a little bit of kind of wanting to get back to normal. You know, I'd already missed like 3 months of school, and this thing really, I was already kind of an awkward kid. So it kind of separated me even further, you know, from other kids. So I kind of wanted to just put it all behind me and just keep on with my left hand. But
you did keep on, and like Richard, your work's been in not only the Seattle Museum of Art, but and please refresh my memory, because I know there was at least one museum in California and one in New York.
The Fowler at UCLA. And then
and was it the Brooklyn Museum?
Brooklyn Museum, correct? Yes.
So you definitely were able to work through it and make some of the beautiful paintings that we saw from the show at Honor Fraser and the show that's currently at Mouse Contemporary.
Correct. Yeah. Thank you. It was just one of the things where I was almost too young to know that that is something that can stop you. It was almost like maybe the youth to some degree shielded me from kind of getting caught up in the trauma, you know, of how you can things like that can really stop you. And you know, I just heard that I was actually, I think, only the 10th child in America to survive a brain tumor, because the medical advances had not gotten to the point where people were surviving tumors anymore. So for years after the surgery, I was in studies, you know, to do long-term studies on survivors. But yeah, so I think I often wonder, had that happened to me as an adult, would have been more interruptive, you know, because as a child, you're still developing and you're still curious, and so much, everything's ahead of you, and you're
you got to adapt as you were still growing up.
Correct. Yeah. And it was, like I said, it had this it was almost fun, you know, to figure out how to use my left hand versus, you know, and so so I do think about that, how it didn't really dawn on me that how traumatic it was until I was an adult and kind of look back like, oh, that could have really, and also other survivors actually can have more problems as far as seizures and all of these kind of residual effects that I was fortunate enough not to have. So, yeah.
Well, and Richard, when your dad was alive, unfortunately, he suffered a massive stroke that caused a lot of similar challenges to what Jakob was describing. Can you talk a little about what you saw with your dad and the way that he continued to learn new ways to make art while he was dealing with the aftermath of his stroke?
Well, yes. You know, one of the things, you know, I'm going to say a lot of the real hard muscular physical work as far as, moving materials, moving canvases and those type of things, me and my brother Dan, we had to aid him, basically, 100% on things like that, keeping things organized for him. But by the same token, he had to reinvent himself also. But I do think, just kind of listen to Jacob there. I guess maybe every profession is like that, because once you grow into a profession, that's basically your lifeline, and you got to do whatever it takes to keep you going, because it's a part of your life, and whatever adjustments that you have to make, then you have to struggle to try to make those adjustments just to to a sense, just to stay human, because you can't like be making art today and be a mechanic tomorrow, so if you make art for a living, then that's just a part of you, and so you got to struggle to make all those ends meet. Dad, he had not only the stroke and stuff like that, like I mentioned, if you put those things together, he had this age situation too, which big sculptures and things that he used to could make, he just couldn't do that anymore.
Well, and the show at the Wiregrass Museum of Art right now focuses primarily on his drawings and works on paper. Was he able to continue that? How was that affected?
Well, the works on paper, I think that was like the biggest part, because he didn't have the motor skills, to, and also, at the museum, they had on display a little screenshot of where he actually, I think that probably was the only, film that he actually was, the only time he ever been filmed, working on paper. And
yeah, he created a drawing from start to finish in that video.
Yeah, so
that
a good
skill, one.
Yeah, but that skill, he suffered greatly from that skill, that making fast moves and from being able to do that successfully. So I don't think he could make those adjustments after the stroke. But the work on canvas and things like that is just most of that creating and putting things like in place, and painting and things of that nature. He also had to reinvent some of those things. But I think like whatever it takes, for you to survive, is kind of like getting your leg amputated. Like my mom, she had a leg amputated, but that didn't stop her from being able to wash and cook and clean. So you have to, some way or another, be able to put your life back together just to carry on. And so I think in events like that, most people, either you give up or you struggle to try to mend that that part of your life and carry on. It just essential to having fulfillment in your life. And you're just gonna, I think that's the average human being, just want to get back to normal regardless, so yeah.
Well, and I'm really glad that you and Dan were there for your dad, because some of the work that he created after the stroke is absolutely breathtaking.
Right.
I apologize that I don't have any images to share with our audience right now, but some of the paintings that we exhibited at Ava that will be on display when the show goes to the LSU Museum of Art in Baton Rouge at the end of the month really are extraordinary.
Yeah. Well, the art, I don't know. I'm just saying it got to be a part of my dad. That's something that just really consumed his whole spirit, and although, he passed, maybe 8, 9 years somewhere in there, after he had the stroke. He never did give up. It was something that, like I said, just consuming to the place that me personally, I had to wonder, I had to look deep down inside me and ask myself, would I have that strength to carry on? But some way or another, he was always able to reach down in himself and pick his own self up, and that's a quality, I hope I would have an event that something do happen to me like that. But it's gonna come eventually to all of us, because we're gonna get older as we live. But that was something that I think was, I just have to give him a lot of credit for having that strength to pull himself up when he needed to, and most one of the best human beings, I guess, I just ever had the knowledge to know, and that was my daddy. And I'm not trying to put anyone else down now, but when you dare and you see, like, you physically just look at somebody in a certain situation and they're able to pull themselves up and say, I'm going to go forward, and got that drive, it's something amazing to see. And he was able to accomplish that. And, I had to look back at that myself to this day, that, because I'm getting a little older now myself, but I looked at the pattern that he set for himself, and I tried to use that to guide my own life, because, if don't have a handicap, but aging itself is a handicap. So you have to really struggle sometimes.
You'll be fine if you stay off that tractor.
Yeah, that's what I'm working on. That's exactly what I'm working on, man. But, it takes that, and you just can't give up, Barrett. You have to. And I think most people, though, that you talk with every day, have conversation with, you can make those adjustments if you just try, And I think that was one of the things that he had more drive in him than I actually knew that he had. And I was, from day one to up until the day he passed, it was just that drive that he had that I would try, I try to emulate, because it was just, it was amazing to see, and glad to just know a person of his caliber to be able to reach down and pull himself up like that.
Well, and Jacob, you've actually started making some new pieces that I had the great pleasure to see at Mouse Contemporary the other day. Yet another brand new series of work that is a continuation of work that you had been doing with some of the paintings that we looked at. Could you talk a little bit about what you're working on now?
So now I'm doing works on paper that are coming from the same series, but even, I guess, interpreting the lines in more of a painterly aspect, even though it's not all painting, it's some painting and drawing, but really kind of going with the same idea of kind of examining noise and working out kind of this human relationship to technology. What does a human error look like versus a computational or a computer error, which is where the word comes from. So it's kind of what I call rehumanizing pixels, you know, that I've been dealing with for like 20 years in my work. Coming from the digital work and trying to reinterpret it as it almost becomes like a re-examination of humanness to a certain extent, and I think that's kind of where we all are as far as, or a lot of us, as far as our relationship to technology, like how helpful has it been as far as the human condition and the human experiment and progress. So I think the newer works are kind of the same, but just in a more or first of all in a smaller dimension. But I think the getting back to drawing and mixing the drawing and the painting has been really kind of enjoyable, or I've enjoyed getting back to that. So,
well, Jacob, I know that you and Richard have had the opportunity to look at each other's work, and I was very gratified that you actually liked each other's work. Do you have any questions for each other that you want to ask here?
Yeah, well, I wanted to continue what we were talking about earlier and ask Richard about just the I thought it was very interesting just being an artist in youth, and being I think it's an interesting way to grow up, and I just kind of wanted to kind of ask you more about that, because and also how that seems to it seems to be something useful. I think I do tend to be one of those artists that believes that art should be a common thing, maybe not as a profession, but it could be music or a craft, but it's something about the study I think is valuable for kids.
Just having creativity in your life.
Creativity, and yes, in psychology, they call it a psychological flow experience. So the experience of focusing on something to the point that you lose sense of time. Like I was reading in the catalog about how they would have to call Mr. Dial in, after dark, because he'd be working all day. And that's psychological flow, where you start to lose sense of time, or, I might be hungry, and you might not pay attention to that because you're so immersed in studying a thing or doing a thing. And I think that is extremely helpful. And I was just wondering with Richard, how that was as a child to have that, or as a teenager.
Well, Jacob, I guess the best way I can explain that to myself, so you can kind of pick it and see what parts of it kind of fit in with your upbringing, But when I look back, I guess I think we're kind of born with a certain sense of like, what your life gonna be like, although you don't know at that particular time, but you gotta search for it. And I think like most people that's successful, they know it's something that's in them that they need to express, regardless of what it is. But when you find that certain thing that kind of comfort you inside, I think those are the people that was lucky enough to find what drives them from the inside is most of the time it's going to be the people that succeed at what they're trying to do. It's just because of like something you was born with that you had to discover, but you know for a fact that it's been around like ever since you was born. And you know, just having this conversation with you, and you went back to like when I was 4 or 5, but it kind of brought up some things about me, you know, that when I was like 4 or 5, you know, little things that I might have was working on or tried to do, it was just different from everybody else in the whole community, you know. And so in a sense, I think it's just once you discover that, hey, you know, this is a part of me, and it depends on what time that you discover that, whether you was 5 or 6 years old or 60 years old, you know. But once you find that, you know, I noticed that with my daddy, you know, and once he really discovered that he could actually create out of his own mind, and people would really, really enjoy it, I think maybe it kind of lit some light bulbs, you know, for him. And he knew from that time to the time that he passed that that was just a part of him, that he really loved it from the bottom of his heart. And I think it's that thing that he had been searching for his whole life, you know. And, you know, also listen to him, you know, I had these quiet moments, you know, where I sit down and try to figure out, like, you know, what was his life like when he was a kid, you know. And like me and you know, he would tell me, you know, like, I'll try to create this little thing over here to play with, because, you know, he didn't have anything to play with. And when I look back at my life, I probably did the same thing. So, and listening to you, you know, you figure out like, oh, this part of life is interesting. This is a part of me. It's creative. So it's something I think that if you look enough in life to discover these things and get a little bit of support, I think that's what, you know, it's something that people in life search for, you know, whether you realize that when you're 5 years old or you're 60 years old, but, you know, once you find out, then it's nothing else in life really means a whole lot to you, because you're doing what you really feel like that, hey, I was born to do. And that's, I think that's where, you know, this separation of people come in. It's take like Barrett, you know, for an example. To me, he got the greatest skill in the world, because if I had his skills, you know, I probably wouldn't have to make art, you know. So, yeah, you know, so
if I could make art, I wouldn't be a curator.
Well, I don't know, you know, because I think a lot of times, you know, people look at other people, you know, and say, you know, I'm not born with that skill, but I got this skill, but I wished I had a little bit of that one too, you know. So, and I look at, you know, the people like Barrett and like, this guy's a genius, you know what I'm saying? And so if I really feel like if I could blend a little bit of Barrett into my life, you know, I probably wouldn't have to talk to nobody. I'd just be a millionaire all the way, all the way over, you know. So
I think
if I could just put a little bit of it in there, Barrett. Yeah, but
so
I really appreciate you for being the person that you are. And like I said, when all these ingredients and stuff come together, it's kind of like you's a part of my life now. You know, it's like getting up in the morning, putting on a sock. You know, it's just, you kind of help make my life up. You know, I get in trouble, I call you, you know, try to help me get my way out of it, you know. But well, I think all of us, you know, it might not be a visual thing that, you know, you can hang on the wall, but all of us got these little special skills that we had to depend on each and every one of us for, you know. And that's also is one of those ingredients that make us succeed in life. And so once you realize that, then it makes all our lives a whole lot better.
I love that. And I think we're going to move into our Q&A section here. So if anyone who's on has some questions, you can go ahead and take some time to either pop them in the chat or the Q&A box specifically, and we can answer those. While people are thinking, I had a question for you, Jacob. I was, as you were speaking about from this young age, this kind of circumstance out of your control happening to you, and you worked your way through that and adjusted. And now later on in life, you've come back to what your kind of like first artistic love was. I was wondering, was that difficult to come back to painting, or was it kind of like riding a bike?
It's more like riding a bike, which I was happy about because I didn't know. I didn't know if I was rusty or whatever, but I was telling Paul a couple nights ago that it's been weird because it actually, I'm in my 40s and thinking, having the memories and the thoughts of me at 12, or like when I was taking these courses, taking the class. So that's been kind of disorienting that I've, this is like 30 years later, and all that stuff is kind of coming back to me, but yeah, so I mean, short answer, it was fairly easy, but to my surprise, because I thought I would be like years off and have to kind of retrain, but fortunately it was not that difficult.
Not a question, but Jerry Siegel says, great talk, and it was so good to see all of y'all.
Oh, hey, Jerry. Yeah.
And I actually also, Richard, I was wondering from you, we saw the wonderful metal chairs that you've been making, and we talked about Dial Metalworks. Like your father, did you ever practice any other mediums? Have you done drawing, works on paper, painting, anything like that?
Well, the paintings, I'm thinking probably from 7th grade to I graduated. It was all about paintings. Like I said, I am most of times I can remember really creating, it was just paintings. And matter of fact, the lady that actually raised my dad from the time he was 12 years old till he got grown, I had made 2 or 3 paintings, and then I gave them to her, and I had forgot about them. And I think Mr. Arnett came by, and he's, dang, who did that? And I told him, it was paintings of mine, and he collected them, and I run into him every once in a while when I go to the warehouse, and he offered to give them back to me, and I just never got them. But I think it's something that still kind of open today, that, okay, they're here, Richard, they were yours, but I did those paintings, when I was like 12, 13 years old. But when I came out of high school, I think I married real young, and then you start looking at like the responsibilities, like, okay, I got a kid over here now, I got a house note. So you start looking at things that, you got to have to survive. And that was, I had to go to work to provide for my family. But that creative skill that I had with painting, I had to turn that into like metalwork, so I think the majority of my life have been just working with metal. And I feel like in my mind that I can do anything that that can be created or done in any kind of way out of metal. So working with metal just really kind of comes natural to me. It's just like, you know, they're taking a glass of water. And that's the area which you're most comfortable in. But, you know, the actual, you know, painting and things like that is something that I think about all the time. And hopefully, you know, I can get back to that. And I really look forward to the day that I can.
Yeah. Well, I don't see any other questions right now. I just want to say thank you so much, both of you, for sharing these intimate details of your work as well as your life. And it's been such a joy to hear and listen to all of that. And I know all of our viewers as well have enjoyed that. Any last words or anything that you want to say before we sign off here?
Thank you all for hosting this and having me, and Richard as well.
Yeah, I'm just saying it's been a pleasure. You know, like I spoke before, you know, I was a little nervous coming into this because it's something, you know, that I don't do all the time, but I really enjoyed, you know, conversating with all of you all. It's just, I've enjoyed every moment of it. So maybe next time I won't be so nervous.
Hey, you did
But
great.
I got to work on it though, but I think I'm getting there. And thank you all
Thank
for
you
your
so
time,
much.
you know, yeah. Right.
Well, I just want to say to everyone viewing too, if you want to keep up to date with everything going on at Wiregrass Museum of Art, you can find us online at wiregrassmuseum.org. We have an online calendar there that keeps up with things like this, as well as in-person events, exhibitions, classes, and workshops, and so much more. So thank you again, everyone. Thank you, panelists. Thank you, Paul, for moderating this. And we look forward to seeing you guys next time.
Okay, we'll be, and I appreciate you all. Thank you
Okay,
very
take care.
much. All right.
Bye,
Thanks, everyone.
All right now.
All right, Paul.
Yeah.
Take care, Richard.
Yes, sir.